This video is a demonstration about how I select a composition, some of the eyeballing and heuristics I use in order to determine if a composition is going to be effective, and then the actual digital tools that I use to set myself up for success when considering how I would translate the digital work into an oil painting. I'm using Procreate for this demonstration, and I'm going to be interweaving the discussion with the recording of my process on my iPad. And in a future video, we're going to actually take that planed painting and turn it into an oil painting. I want to start with this demonstration as kind of the beginning of my painting course, because I think it helps to see the whole process through and through before we necessarily jump into how we're going to talk about specific painting techniques or tips or anything else in that nitty-gritty space. So let's just go start to finish, make an oil painting. Typically when I start, I like to choose a canvas that is the same aspect ratio as my painting. So I'm going to be working with a 16-inch by 20-inch canvas. So this is the 16 side and this is the 20 side. And what we'll be doing is getting a photo in here that I think matches a compelling composition or a subject that I want to explore in particular. And I don't think I've painted this yet, and we certainly could do this as a large scale piece. I think that it's always worthwhile to consider your options here. I like to roughly use the rule of thirds when thinking about a painting. So what I'm going to do here is roughly divide my canvas into thirds here, kind of sort of. And I like to generally track along anything that seems like it might be an interesting focal point. This is the golden ratio armature that I'm using here. So I like this composition because we have a lot of interesting stuff going along this line. We're generally tracking along this third for this facet of the vase here, which meets us at this top third, and the flower here is kind of in this interesting index on you could call this coordinate, I don't know, it's 1, 2, something like that. I like it, let's paint it. So typically what I like to do when I start a painting like this is I'm going to add another layer, and the underpainting that I used for this previous painting, the panel that I've already underpainted, is kind of this like gray. I want to say it's actually a warmer gray than this. So let's make this a little bit warmer, and typically I'm going to do something kind of like this. Maybe it's a little bit of a warmer gray. Kind of a purple almost. And if I remember right, it actually is a little more gray than that. So let's get that a little bit grayer. Next, what I like to do is actually bump this up and reduce the opacity so that I can target my general structures for a drawing. So we'll do the drawing now. And all that I like to do when I first start a drawing is get the main elements of the composition in ahead of anything else. So I'm going to try to get the facets of this vase. I'm going to say here's this main lily, here's this other lily, which is super interesting to me. And we've got, trying to not go too far into the weeds here. Got these other lilies. We've got maybe some sticks and brambles. Some eucalyptus that's going to be really interesting, and a big leaf over here, another big leaf right here, something like this. We've got another one, we've got another one, and we've got yet one more. So now that I have this down, I'm actually going to, I try to increase the fidelity of any drawing kind of consistently. So before I do that, however, I'm going to block in my shadow and my table, the lines for my shadow on my table, and get this cast shadow in here. And the cast shadow, I like to generally make as contiguous as possible ahead of time. So I know that this area is my shadow, and I've got more shadows and things back here, but all of these shadows, we've got another shadow block back here, we've got another one back here. I like to paint these in ahead of time, and then I'm actually going to go over it with my foreground color in due time. But all of these dark shadows that are really small and I don't consider main blocks of my painting, I'm going to leave those out. By the way, if you're interested in this sort of content, I'm going to be posting more painting tutorials on my Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, as well as in my course, which is on my website. It's totally free. So if you want to see the full result from start to finish, go check that out. I've been really working with this kind of primary color shadow theme, and I really do actually kind of want to do like an interesting, like near monochromatic piece. I've been using orange a lot lately, so what we're going to do is we are going to establish a first pass against the shadow. So I'm going to draw the shadows in with oil paint, make my brush a little bit smaller, and I'm going to get anything in here that looks like a shadow to me. So really, again, painting crude to fine. I don't care too much about the fidelity, mostly just where I know there are shadows. And there's another little shadow bit back here. So really, to me, this is the shadow. And when I paint this, I will paint it generally in this pattern. I'm going to paint the shadows, which are the furthest receding layer, and then I'm probably going to touch up the background, the light that is actually going beyond the vase and forms the edges of the cast shadow. So for that, I think I kind of want to use like an interesting, slightly drab, maybe a Naples yellow, Portland cool gray kind of thing. So typically for that, I make yet another layer. And often I will decrease the value, or sorry, the opacity of my shadow. I'm gonna get rid of my drawing here. And I'm actually gonna bump up the opacity of my painting. So this, I'm really targeting getting some of those edges a little bit more correct. This down here is really interesting, so we're going to try to get a little bit more of a fidelity with the second layer of oil paint that will go over it. And I like to, at this point, maybe block in my rough edge for the vase and for the table. And I also see that there are shadows in this area that I'm covering up with paint now. And that's okay. I'm probably gonna go back over those much later, but what I really want to do more than anything else is get this pass of light over the top of it. So you might be wondering, okay, great, what does this look like now? So if we remove this, this is what our painting would look like. Obviously, it doesn't look like much of a painting yet, and that's okay. What we're going to do next is take I actually usually like to set a palette, so any of the colors that I've used, I'm going to save them. I should have saved my orange, but that's okay. My orange for my shadow, I'll come back and figure that out again. We can always go and pluck that, so if I want to just use this layer at full opacity, take everything else out of the equation, I can take this color and save it. So to me, this is really the gist of the shadow, and after kind of looking at this, I know that there are a lot of elements that I'm going to need to touch up, but that's totally okay. Next, what I'm gonna do is try to actually get some interesting lines on the vase here. I think for the vase, I want to use something actually complementary. I know that I was saying monochromatic, but let's use not quite the complement of the color that we were working with. We're going to gray it down a little bit. I'm actually going to draw over the top of it. We do have a little element of reflected light here that I'm covering up, but again, I'm trying to get my biggest blocks. And one of the rules of thumb in painting that you can use is that you should try to consider if you only had paper that you were trying to construct a painting with, and every time you cut the paper, it cost you $1 or however much might be a significant amount of money to you, how many cuts would you make? And this block of paint is much better than if we said, well, we've got another cut that's here and then another cut that's here. Any of that stuff, we're going to just ignore that for now. Maintain the hue here. And there are, again, many elements to this painting where we are kind of just washing over some of the important details. And we're going to ignore those for now. Like this highlight, just wash over it, it's okay. Again, trying to maintain that crude to fine painting, which is an element that we're going to plan for now and account for later. The other thing that I'm now actually going to consider is that my values between these two, the shadow side of the vase and the value in the shadow that I've chosen, are roughly the same. And the way that we can do that is we can actually bump up the value of everything else. So I think actually I'm going to have a really even brighter blue here. The next thing that I'm doing is I'm also going to compare my values that I have, say, for this, and my values that I'm using for the brights in the vase. And this is the bright color that we're using. I'm kind of eyeballing this more than anything. If this is the vase and this is the value that is light cast onto the wall, this is like slightly darker, this slightly brown or gray. Not a big deal to me. I'm actually very much okay sort of just leaning into things that are light, things that are dark, all good. And any of these corrections I might also make while I'm painting. I'm not trying to be set in stone here. Generally, I like to choose things that I think will be pleasing in oil paint, but there's a lot of nuance to the actual paint itself, so I'm not going to be so rigid that I want to match my exact color that I'm using in this composition in this sketch. So next, let's think about all of our colors that we've used here. I really like the idea of using a yellow that is maybe a little bit cooler, maybe a little bit more vibrant, or actually, you know, we can let the lily be red. We can absolutely let that lily be red. Let's just see how this feels. That's a little too high chroma for me. There's good contrast between these two, but not so much between these two that I'm kind of thinking I'm actually gonna bump this down, make this a little bit darker, not too much darker. And we don't have to go crazy with our edges or controlling any of that because of the fact that we did our layers correctly the first time. Yet to do the table. So let's get that table layer in here now. I'm gonna use actually a gray that is quite similar to this blue. We'll use like a steely kind of gray here. This goes away, we'll take this color, and we want to clean up our line that we have for our table. It's not quite this shadow, it's not really this either. So let's just take the color that we were using for this. Maybe we'll make it a little bit darker. I'm gonna put this one on top. And I'm cool with hard edges. I like to paint with a palette knife, and that gives me little opportunity often to actually paint with some hard edges. Again, I'm going to even decrease this value for the shadow that we have here, and I want to make sure that this shadow, the value between the shadow on the vase and the shadow that is cast are comparable. They don't have to be exactly the same, and I'm okay with painting this really all the way down here because both of these layers are going to sit under the layer for the vase. So this is what we've got so far.